Good evening, attendees. Welcome. I see the attendee list growing. This is great. I'll give folks a few minutes, a couple of minutes to arrive, and then we'll kick off. Awesome. Welcome, welcome. I'm seeing a few familiar names on the attendees list. Welcome one and all. You guys are very punctual. I will give the stragglers a little extra time to arrive. Hello, hello, welcome. We'll kick off in just maybe 60 more seconds. We'll give folks a little bit more time to resolve the inevitable connection issues that Zoom will have brought.
I think we're pretty much experts now as a nation on Zoom.
Yeah. We'll all look back on 2020 as the year we fully embraced video conferencing for real.
Yeah. And actually, I think what's interesting is it's the non-technical people that have really embraced it more than I think the people who work in the industry. It's amazing. I've seen some amazing stories of people like personal fitness trainers, sort of coaches, personal life coaches, all learn how to use it, and actually now are really thinking that it's the future and they don't want to go back to how they did it in the old ways.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. All right, 2 minutes past. Let's just again welcome everybody to the call, to our webinar. For those who haven't used Zoom before, we are recording this session, so don't let that make you shy. There's also, most of you will be joining as attendees, so you won't be able to speak, and we can't hear, if you're saying anything, we can't hear you just now, so rest assured you're safe. Also, we can't see you just now, and you won't be able to turn on your video, so don't worry about people spying into your house or anything like that. If you do want to speak, I think there's a raise hand button on the little toolbar at the bottom of the screen. And you should find there's access to a Q&A window as well, which I'll leave open throughout the session. So if anyone has any questions for myself or for the panelists or for each other, then feel free to submit them in the Q&A and I'll direct them to the relevant people. I'm Alistair Hodge. I'm an engineer at Cloudsoft. We have my colleague Aled here on the call as well. And I recognize some of my colleagues in the attendees list as well. I'll be chairing today's event. This is, I think, the 7th in our Cloud Pathways series that we've done over the months and over the last couple of years. So today we're going to be talking about preparing and planning migrating your apps and workloads to AWS. And we've got a couple of great speakers. We have my colleague Aled Sage. Give everyone a wave, Aled. That's Aled. He's our VP of Engineering at Cloudsoft, very experienced in helping customers migrate to using AWS. We also have Ricardo Sueiras. Give us a wave, Ricardo. Ricardo is from AWS. He's an enterprise evangelist who's also very experienced at talking about the vast AWS toolkit and migration options for AWS's customers. So welcome. Aled and Ricardo will give a couple of presentations. I hope these will be thought-provoking and stimulate some discussion and some Q&A. After that, we will have a panel with some interesting topics of conversation, and joining that panel will be Peter Deak from Origo. He's development manager at Origo. We've been working with Origo quite recently, assisting with migrating some various workloads into AWS and helping them review and modernize and just generally use the cloud well, which is great to hear about. So we look forward to hearing of some of Peter's experiences as well. So without further ado, I will stop talking. I'm going to hand over the stage to Ricardo from AWS, who is going to give a presentation on cloud adoption and migration. Over to you, Ricardo.
Thank you, Alistair, and welcome everyone. Good evening, wherever you are. And so in this session, over the next 20 to 25 minutes, I'm going to talk to you about, as an organization, you've made the decision to go to the cloud, and how do you start thinking about what you need to do to prepare and make sure that your cloud adoption is going to be successful and sustainable. So my name is Ricardo Sueiras, and I'm a principal advocate at AWS. I focus on open source, but I've got a lot of experience working in the enterprise space. So in this session, I'm going to talk to you about cloud adoption strategy, what it is, why it's important, and some of the things you need to look out for along the way to help you. So what we've seen in organizations that have been successful in cloud adoption is that there's a strong alignment between the cloud adoption program and the business values that you get from that cloud adoption. So, and I think it's really important that cloud adoption is critical to enable business transformation. But I think too often I see it being treated as an IT project. And so this can lead to focusing just on the cost savings. So this is the thing on the left-hand side, the TCO. And you're not going to benefit from the overall value that cloud can bring. So creating a cloud adoption strategy can help you look just beyond the TCO and look across the other benefits, such as increased productivity, better resilience, better security, as well as better organizational agility. So just a few examples, okay? So the ability to right-size applications and optimize on the different instance types that you can get with AWS allows you to very easily optimize your workloads without having to do too much work. So you can go from the over 200 types of instance types, all different sizes, capacities, and processor architectures that allow you to have that flexibility and then as an organization save you some costs. Removing undifferentiated heavy lifting from your technical resources allows you to focus more on creating business value. So this is where you're using AWS managed services such as RDS, or perhaps you want to focus your engineers on writing more business logic rather than managing infrastructure. And so this is under the pillar of staff productivity. So reducing downtime for your enterprise applications and leveraging the AWS global infrastructure and the regional availability zones, you know, the best-in-class security, as well as giving you options to have very robust disaster recovery, allows you to, as an organization, increase your operational resilience. And what we've seen is that can help reduce your kind of like P1 and P0 issues by 90%. And then finally is being able to leverage these AWS services to innovate and add new capabilities within your own organization. So the ability to very quickly spin up and spin down stuff to experiment is one of the key things really that increases organizational agility. And so some of you might have seen this diagram. It's what we call the cloud adoption journey. And what we tend to see is organizations start on the bottom left under project and work their way or look and aspire to go toward the reinvention at the top right. So I'm just going to talk very briefly about what these different stages are, and perhaps maybe you can see where you are on this scale. So in the project phase, this is where we see organizations and enterprises start with a few projects just because they want to understand what is cloud, how does it work, what do I need to start thinking about? And organizations often start with picking maybe a project that's small, non-critical, but important as a way of driving that experimentation. And I've often seen this happen within business units within organizations. So it doesn't always start within enterprise IT. It quite often actually starts within the business departments within a business. So it's typically a small project that allows you to get a handle on what is this thing called cloud? How can I use it? What value am I going to get from it? And what we see after that is once an organization has understood cloud more and they realize that they can benefit from it, the next phase really is around creating some foundational investment so that they can benefit across the organization. So you might have heard the term landing zone, which is where you kind of establish a kind of a secure, governed and supported beachhead within your organization to start being able to use and adopt some of these services. You start thinking about skilling your people, creating a kind of cloud adoption office that will help, be the central point for cloud going forward. It's at this point really where most organizations are a good point to then start thinking about how to take their existing workloads they have and move to the cloud. And we're seeing, increasing organizations going all in and making the decision to move those workloads. And sometimes it's an event such as maybe a data center running out of capacity or closing, or maybe a lease expiring. Maybe it's a tech refresh. There's lots of different kind of catalysts that can cause this. But the migration piece, which is what we're going to focus on a lot for the rest of today, is kind of the next phase. But ultimately, what organizations are trying to do, whether they're going through the migration route or whether going from foundation for new applications straight to this reinvention. So this is where organizations are looking to make use of cloud native architectures to get the full benefit against those 4 pillars of cloud value. And so the path, what we see at foundation, for example, is that once the policies and security and teams in place, organizations begin to start creating cloud first policies. But of course, they've still got these two environments they're running. Okay, they've got the new applications that they're trying to develop and architect for cloud, and they've got their existing applications that they've got in their data centers, but they're increasingly wanting to move those into cloud. So, what we see in organizations that are doing this is a common set of challenges, okay, which can slow down that adoption. So I'm going to talk about these 4 very briefly, and then we'll talk about actually how and some strategies on how to tackle them. So the first challenge, and this is going to be a thing you're going to hear over and over today, is the one around business alignment. Okay, the biggest challenge customers experience is that their cloud initiatives may not be aligned, okay, with their business goals. And this, as I've mentioned before, focuses the project and the activities just on TCO rather than those 4 pillars of business value. And so some of the kind of common issues and mistakes we see here is, not setting a vision and strategy for the cloud adoption that's aligned to business outcomes, where the capabilities that are delivered through cloud are not fit for what the business wants. And I think this is something I've seen quite a lot actually, where organizations come up with a nice portal, they give it to the business, but it's actually not what the business wanted. The business wanted the higher level services that they wanted to use. And organizations sometimes pursue cloud just as a technology initiative, right, rather than focusing it as a business objective. The second challenge we see is around the effective adoption of cloud. And this is where customers experience the fact they've gone cloud, but it's not very effective in how it's used. So typically it's the warning signs here are they take existing mechanisms and processes that organizations have got and try and bolt that onto cloud. And one of the classic ones is ITIL and putting a lot of the ITIL processes around cloud. And so some of the things to look out for here is really understanding, having a deep knowledge of what cloud is from both the executive level all the way down through to your developers, and spreading that knowledge through different internal mechanisms. Thinking about best practices and how you adopt those and how you learn about those within your own organization. And then the other kind of thing we see is, lots of duplication within organizations, okay, which is causing some teams to work more effectively than others. The third challenge is what customer experiences tell us is that they've not got adequate security or compliance controls in place, which leads to fears that the cloud environment they've got is not suitable for the important applications and mission critical applications. So this is the kind of the third challenge that we hear about. And so some of the warning signs here is that the cloud environment doesn't have the appropriate security controls or compliance controls needed, and they haven't thought about automation in how they do that. So a good example is when you give developers the environments, all the kind of the way that's provisioned, what they can do has all been automated, all the guardrails have been codified, and so they get given an environment they can use that's only got the level of access that they need and no more. And then the final challenge that we see customers experience is that the actual execution in their cloud might not be very efficient. So this could be the way that they onboard their customers, how they support it, and also how they actually then use it. And we'll talk more about the cost optimization piece a bit later on. So how do you overcome some of those challenges, and how do you then use that to speed up your cloud adoption, and also at the same time make sure that you gain that full business value and buy-in from cloud? And so I want to introduce, for those people who may not have heard it, the Cloud Adoption Framework. We call it CAF for short. Now, CAF provides guidelines and best practices to help you build this comprehensive approach and your cloud adoption strategy across all your organization. Okay, so not just the IT, and it's based on a business benefits realization mechanism. So just to put that in context, there's actually quite a few of these out there, and the PMI Institute, who are the governing body that look after program managers, did a study, and they said that a project goes from being 30% more likely to be successful to 70% more successful if you adopt a benefits realization approach or mechanism. And so really, this approach, this mechanism, helps organizations start to build in and set up for success in how they can adopt. And it does that through these 6 pillars. So I'm going to talk very quickly about some of those areas, and we call these pillars perspectives, and each perspective is used to create a work stream, and it uncovers gaps, uncovers skill gaps, it uncovers process gaps, and it does this all through conversation. So one of the key things around the CAF is you get people from across the business, you get them from the very highest level within the organization. So when we run these, we typically get CEOs, CTOs, CIOs involved, and then we mix them with some of the other parts of the business. It's facilitated. It's a like 2 to 3 hour workshop, and the idea really is to help that group of people envision what cloud can do from a digital transformation perspective, and then align them all so they all understand what they need to do. So as an example, you will start with the CEO, CIO, COO articulating the business vision. So, I want to be the biggest player in this market. And from there, we then work out what the business drivers are. Once we have the business drivers, we then have stakeholders and KPIs and metrics that show us how well we're doing against those business drivers. And the stakeholders own those metrics. Now, once we do that, and only when we've done that, we then start breaking out into specific streams of work, which are not specifically tied to AWS, but they can be delivered through migration. Now, the idea behind this is that once you've got that joined up piece from the activity or work stream of work all the way through to a stakeholder, a metric, to a business driver that leads to the business goal, you now have got accountability, you've got executive sponsorship and oversight, you've got someone who cares about the project. And this is what can lead to successful migrations, because they're now being driven by the business. Now, we've done this hundreds of times, And this methodology, whilst we can run it with you, is available for our partners, and you can go to your preferred partner and they can run these workshops with you as well. It's all available on the AWS website. You can take a look at the materials, you can look at some videos, and you can run these things yourself. Just to see, I'm just making sure I'm doing how I'm doing time-wise. So for those people who have not been one or seen one before, it involves copious amounts of sticky notes. It involves people breaking out into small teams. It's a lot of fun, but it's not a lot of time. Okay, so the idea here is to try and get something actionable within a very, very short period of time. And the first kickoff workshop can typically be done in a day. And so, takeaway here is, if you're interested in this, if you think it's going to be useful, by all means have a chat with us, but also speak with your partners that who can help you with this. So the single most important consideration that we have found, and I mentioned it already twice before, is to have that executive sponsorship. So when you're going through cloud adoption, there are going to be many decisions that you need to navigate across your business. And these will include the economic ones, cultural, hiring, risks, not just within enterprise IT, but across all the different lines of the business. And my colleague, Jonathan, who used to be the CTO at Capital One, he puts it really well when he says that this is the function you just can't delegate. In fact, if you can't get executive sponsorship, then you need to really wait and think about, how you go about doing that, and whether, as an organization, your cloud adoption is going to be successful without that. Now, you want to try and get the highest and most senior decision maker, someone that's got enough clout to make the decisions. And we typically find that the most successful cloud adoption is where a C-suite member is involved, and we have often seen also the CEO involved. So once you've done this piece, and once you've got your your executive sponsorship and your business engaged into your journey to cloud, which is what we call the foundation, that's when you're now ready to look at the process of migration. And migration is a key part of your cloud adoption strategy. And we've helped hundreds of enterprises, both large and small, sort of be successful in their migration projects. We know migrations can be challenging. We know they can be disruptive, both not just for IT, but for the people who use IT within the business. So you've got to deal with lots of complex issues and challenges. And because of the experience we've gained doing this, we've developed a structured methodology, which we called MAP, or the Migration Acceleration Program. Now, we call it MAP for short. So MAP consists of sort of 3 steps for migrating to AWS. I'm going to cover 2 of these, and I think Alad's going to talk about the migrate and modernize piece a bit later. So the first step really is the assessment phase, which is where you're building the business case, understanding your application portfolio, to understand what your current capabilities are, what you need to work on, and the business case really. The second step, which is the mobilize, is where you actually start to begin to do the heavy lifting, start to do the engineering work, start to build the foundations for the migration. The assess phase is where you focus on decision support. So what should I move? Should I move it? How should I move it? And the mobilize phase is where you're doing the planning support. So what do I need to do? Who do I need to have? What do I need to set up? How should I migrate it? That kind of stuff. So I'm going to very quickly, just conscious of time, quickly look at some of these pieces. So in the assessment phase, we've got a bunch of tools you can use. So I've only got a few of them here. The first one, which is the kind of cloud adoption readiness tool. It's a self-service tool that you can use to get a kind of gauge very, very quickly some of the areas against the CAF pillars as to where you have got strengths and where you've got deficiency, so you can begin to start looking at them. The migration readiness assessment workshop is a much more detailed workshop which dives deep and provides you an action plan of how you can start doing all the things you need to get ready for your migration. And then we've got tools like TCO Logic that can actually provide rich information that allow you to start building the business case and providing different options for migrating specific applications. So understanding the different TCO or cost of running applications before migration and after migration. So the kind of the migration easy for me to say, the migration readiness assessment MRA, okay, is aligned to the CAF 6 dimensions. Okay, so this is where it all becomes joined up. So if you do the CAF envisioning, it's a nice input into the migration readiness, because you're now beginning to understand what you need to do, the kind of the gaps you've got. But because everyone and you've got all the executive sponsorship that you've kind of got as an output of doing the CAF, these help push these forward. In the mobilize phase, this is where we start, bringing the tools and the expertise and the migration resources together to actually build your migration processes. And these are kind of the typical 8 work streams. So the discovery and planning is where you do your application portfolio. Really, really important, this phase, to understand not just what applications you've got, but what value do they bring. I've been in plenty of migrations where they had applications that were being used by 2 people and they were costing them hundreds of thousands of pounds. So, it's a really important step. The landing zone is the kind of the foundation of your technical environment. We then got making sure you've got the right training and skills within your organization. And this is really where partners come in. And partners, really what we see in migrations is partners being used to help with both the execution, but also the skilling up of organizations. So I mentioned partners. There are many partners that you can use to help with migration. These are just some of the ones here, and they can help you all the way from running the CAF workshops and helping you with your cloud adoption strategy to actually execution of the strategy as well. Just to kind of give you a bit of a clue from the point of view of the impact of training your staff has on successful migrations, we can see here that what we've seen from our data, okay, is that the more you educate and skill up with your own internal resources, the more likely you are to have successful migrations, but also the more likely you are to have faster migrations. And then after the migration, the more those skills can help you move up towards reinvention. So just towards the end now of my presentation, what we've seen, okay, when organizations have taken this approach, and if we look at the bottom here, we've seen organizations shift away from just the typical focus of cost savings, okay, from moving to the cloud, to the additional benefits of staff productivity, business resilience, and business agility. So 62% of their IT staff are more productive, which means they can do more projects, and also they're more satisfied. Operational resilience allows your organizations to have much more resilient systems, more secure systems. And we at AWS, we've been adopting these practices, and we have 7 times fewer downtime than the next biggest cloud provider. And then, key to the business really is the ability for them to deploy new features for their customers. And what we see is, 3 times more features being delivered for the customers. And that's really a key indicator for the customers, for the business rather. So actions to get you started. First of all, you can go online and do the cloud readiness assessment. You'll do it very quickly. It'll give you a very, very quick report that tells you what gaps you might have, where to start working, that kind of thing. The next thing really is thinking how you think as an organization about your executive sponsorship. Who is the person in the business that's driving your cloud adoption, and how have you aligned it with the business? And then thinking about the CAF and whether you want to do a workshop with a partner or just have a look at materials and see if you can do it yourself. And then the final one really, set yourself up for success, work with a partner that's done this before. And with that, one final recommendation. My colleagues Jonathan and Thomas, they've wrote this book. It was published at the beginning of this year, I believe. It tells the stories of a few of the enterprise strategist team who have migrated various organizations from public sector to commercial. They share a lot of wisdom in this, much of which I've shared today, but much more. Go check it out. It's available on your favorite online bookstore. And with that, I'm hand it over to you, Alistair.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Ricardo.
You're welcome.
That was great. Just a quick reminder to folks, if people would like to raise their hands to ask a question, I will be able to unmute you, or if you'd like to pop a question into the Q&A, that would also be very welcome. Feel free. I'm now going to introduce, assuming there are no questions just now, we will have a Q&A session as part of our fireside chat. I will now hand over to Alad Sage, who is my colleague at Cloudsoft. He's VP of Engineering, and he is going to talk through some of our thinking on the cloud adoption framework and various migration strategies, the 7 R's. Over to you, Alad. Mute.
Thanks. Right, started up my screen sharing, hopefully.
It's perfect.
Right. So I'm going to talk about migration strategies, which will complement what Ricardo just talked about there. So I'll briefly cover why move to cloud, but Ricardo's really already given a great overview of that, as well as much more. The bulk of my time will be on the migration strategies, and of course, there'll be dragons. So looking at the pros and cons of each approach and what can go wrong. So the obligatory company slide. So I'm VP Engineering at Cloudsoft. I spend a lot of my time helping customers move to cloud, modernizing their applications and automating their operations. That includes consultancy to help customers prepare for cloud adoption, and also hands-on technical work to migrate applications. And the Cloudsoft engineers combine expertise in cloud application automation, which is an important combination to get the most out of cloud. On to the actual content now. So Ricardo's already covered the main benefits of moving to AWS. I'd echo that agility and innovation are really key points here. So companies have to continually reinvent themselves and evolve to stay competitive. There's disruptors in pretty much every industry offering novel services or cut down cheaper versions of existing services. So as a thought experiment, you could think about how long does it take your company to go from a business idea to delivering that into customer hands? Or how long does it take for you to offer your service in a new geography? Now, often the biggest challenges here are not technical, but are to do with the structure and the processes within the organization. So if you draw out a value chain, how much of the time would be spent by application developers versus the team being blocked waiting for other silos like operations or security? And how much do the priorities and requirements change for the application team? In the book, The Unicorn Project by Gene Kim, which I'd thoroughly recommend, he draws on his experience with a lot of companies, and he looks at the time to go from that idea to delivery. And he gives an example where only 2% of that time is caused by software development, and the rest is caused by blockers, switching between teams where operations and security are in separate silos, or by the changing requirements and changing priorities of the business. So the cloud's not a silver bullet, but it does give you a great tool set, and it's a big enabler for helping solve those problems. On to the phases of cloud migration. So the preparation and business planning is massively important. We could talk for hours about just that. It's important to have clear business objectives and for everyone to be on board with that. The cloud journey as well will impact many parts of the organization. So the finance team will have to cope with a change to OpEx from CapEx and, most importantly, unpredictable spend. The governance and compliance teams need to understand how the move to cloud is going to impact them, be that to do with data sovereignty, information for auditors, impacts on contracts, and so on. Security team obviously have a lot of new things to learn and to figure out how to put guardrails in place. Operations teams need to worry about how lots of their existing processes are going to change. For example, there's new automation tools available, deployment mechanisms, the ability to spin up a new replacement resource rather than modifying existing ones. And all of this requires a big change in mindset compared to how they deal with things on-prem. And then obviously the application teams themselves, to get the most out of cloud, you want to make use of these managed services that are available, change the way the application team works for the operations and security to break down those silos. Portfolio discovery, Ricardo's already talked about that. So there's various tools available to help with that, to figure out what applications need to be migrated. But the bulk of my time here, I'm going to talk about that next box of the actual migration. So importantly, this could start with just one of your applications, even while you're still trying to figure out your entire portfolio. You could look at a lighthouse application. So we call it a lighthouse application because it's sort of lighting the way. It's set an example. It's and one where you're going to learn a lot from migrating that. So let's look at the strategies we could use for that migration. So these are called the 7 R's of migration, and I'll walk through each of these in more detail. Reading from top to bottom, the options get simpler and less time consuming. We can also draw that in another way and talk about the agility that these things give you. So as we look at Relocate, Rehost, Replatform, and Refactor, each of those gets increasingly hard, but increasingly more benefit in doing that. And importantly, we don't need to try to get to this end goal of a beautiful cloud native application in one step. Trying to do so can result in a very slow project. Instead, it's good to think of an iterative approach. So if you do a rehost, if you lift and shift to the cloud, don't view that as the end of your journey. You're then going to modernize that application. You're going to do that incrementally, delivering more value as you improve your use of cloud and get to the point where you are running this more as a cloud native application. So another way to think of these different approaches is, like on this graph, we're looking at the amount of effort it is. So as we move up and to the right, then that particular strategy is going to take longer, it's going to be more effort, and it's going to require more expertise. But let's jump into the details of those strategies now. So the first one is retire. So during the discovery phase, particularly for a large enterprise who have hundreds of applications, potentially thousands of applications, this involves going through and figuring out what applications are running the data center, and most importantly, looking at the business value of each. This frequently identifies applications that could just be turned off or that could be sunsetted. The reason for this is that part of the problem with having, say, a CMDB as a record of what's running within your data center is that it's often out of date. There's not good automation process in place to update that CMDB as things are changed. Where it does list your resources, it's often just an inventory rather than saying what the applications are that are using those resources or the business that's associated with. So there's often no way to tie it back to the business value. Now, when we move to cloud, there's lots of good strategies as well to deal with this. Like, obviously, this is giving you a real-time view of the resources that you have, and you can query those, you can tag those, and you can track those a lot better as well. Next up, we've got retain. So the answer for some applications might be, don't move it to cloud. And there's some good reasons for doing that. So for example, you might have just bought a whole load of existing hardware and it's not the right time to move those resources off from a cost perspective, or for whatever reason, you might want to sweat the existing assets that you have in your data center. Sometimes the contracts that you've signed with customers make it hard to move to cloud due to the wording that was used in that contract, for example, about where data is going to be hosted. Sometimes that wording can be changed, other times it can't. Sometimes the application might be just on really quite unusual hardware. So for example, if you've got some mainframe application, maybe it's not worth the effort at this point in time to migrate that to the cloud. And the last one there of the business justification. So if we took the example of if an application is going to get sunsetted, maybe you decide, actually, we'll just eventually turn it off. It's not worth the effort to try to migrate this application. The next option here is repurchase. So where you're running commercial off-the-shelf or COTS software, repurchase is often the right choice. So you can stop doing that undifferentiated heavy lifting and hand that over to people who specialize in running that particular system. You can buy that as software as a service or a SaaS offering instead. For example, if you've got email systems, CRM, payroll, ticketing systems, source control, there's loads of good SaaS solutions out there for those. And it's really worth considering whether buying that is going to be far more cost effective and far better for your organization rather than running those in-house. Some of the other systems running in-house may have been built at a time when there wasn't a good COTS offering available. So thinking about repurchasing those and throwing away those bespoke in-house systems is also worth considering. So the business context when that system was written may well have changed. So it's worth reevaluating and seeing whether those things could move to SaaS and you could get rid of the overhead of maintaining those systems. But of course, there is a risk to this repurchase. So you need to think about things like, where's the data hosted? Is that acceptable for you? What about access through a single sign-on and authentication? How does that work? Similarly, will moving to a SaaS model for this require you to do upgrades of the software, reconfigure the systems, and what impact will that have on other systems that integrate with this? And for those dependencies that are making use of the system, how will those communicate with this SaaS system? So do you need to like open up connectivity from private networks, for example, and is that acceptable for you? So the next option, Relocate. So this is the newest migration method added. It used to be the 6 Rs and then became the 7 Rs with Relocate. And the idea here is to make use of VMware Cloud on AWS. So this gives you a managed VMware environment. You can pay for hosts on demand. You can integrate with various other AWS services like RDS, which is the Managed Relational Database Service. So you can get some of the advantages of those managed services that AWS offer, while also still running on VMware. And as such, like the VMware expertise and heavy investment that you might have in the processes and tools, you can continue to take advantage of. So if you are a big VMware shop with a lot of expertise in that area, this could be a good choice to get to the cloud fast. So for example, if you wanted to exit your data center quickly, or alternatively, if you wanted a disaster recovery environment, so instead of running 2 data centers, you cut back to 1 and have AWS as your secondary data center for disaster recovery. So the thing about this option is it does feel expensive to some of our customers moving to cloud compared with other services, like if they were using EC2 for VMs. You're still paying a lot of money for VMware licenses. It can also be hard to modernize from this point, to modernize your application to make it take advantage of more AWS services. You're still running on VMware, so in terms of, for example, auto scaling, trying to move to having immutable infrastructure and so on, there's a lot of challenges here that you've not tackled at all by just moving to VMware Cloud on AWS. So really got to think about that future modernization. Rehost, also known as lift and shift, is the most common approach. So this keeps changes to the application to a minimum. For example, you could migrate by just moving machine images as is. Importantly, you are moving to AWS services such as EC2 for VMs. There's great tools available to help you with this. So for our application discovery service, which will help you figure out what's running, for example, in your on-prem VMware environment, the server migration service to help you move those VMs into AWS, and the data migration service to help you migrate your relational database. That service can do a lot more, actually. It can also help you change the database you use. For example, move your data from SQL Server to MySQL or from Oracle to Postgres. But obviously that goes far beyond lift and shift. So the main benefits of lift and shift are the speed and simplicity. So you're treating the VMs like a black box, so you don't need to know too much about what's inside. However, that's also the big downside of lift and shift. So you're migrating any brittle processes that come with that VM. And importantly, you're not taking advantage of everything that cloud can offer. So it's important, if you do this strategy, to make sure that you're budgeting for a modernization afterwards and setting expectations with management that you're going to have to spend time afterwards to modernize. Otherwise, you won't get the real cloud advantages of agility, resilience, advanced security, cost reduction, because there's a risk you just are treating AWS like another data center. which brings us on to Replatform. So with this approach, we make a few improvements during the migration. So importantly, we're not changing the code or the shape of the application architecture much. So examples of this could be that where you were previously running with a load balancer that would say Nginx or F5, instead of just moving that as is to the cloud, you could switch to the AWS Elastic Load Balancer, which is a fully managed service that's going to be scalable and reliable that AWS are offering you. You could also hook into the AWS WAF, which is the Web Application Firewall, for improved security, AWS Shield or Shield Advanced for distributed denial of service attacks. So again, we're trying to make use of the services that are easy to add on or replace without major change to your application. Another example is, like, instead of running databases yourself in your VMs, you could switch to using RDS, the relational database system, or relational database service even. And with this, like, AWS are some of the best on the planet at managing databases. They're managing hundreds of thousands of databases for their customers and doing it incredibly well. They'll handle your backups, your failovers, your upgrades, and so on. So to think that there's very few companies in the world who could manage databases anywhere near as well as AWS. So handing that responsibility over to them and standardizing is a good thing to do. So in terms of the benefits, particularly compared to lift and shift, you're beginning to get more of the immediate benefits of cloud. And this includes things like total cost of ownership, but more importantly, it's around the, you're stopping doing that undifferentiated heavy lifting. You're not managing these components yourself anymore. You're letting AWS do that. But one common risk is that people do this migration manually rather than with automation. So this includes clicking around in the AWS console to make changes rather than using configuration as code. And the risk if you do that is that it's hard to keep track of how things are supposed to be configured. So what's a deliberate change versus just something that somebody changed without review? It's hard to ensure that your staging and production environments are configured in the same way, and it's much more likely to introduce human error. The other big risk is when people try to change too much at once. So stick to common, well-known components and don't accidentally stray into doing a refactor. Which leads me on to refactor. So this involves major changes to your application, to the application code, its architecture, and even how the data is stored. It often involves a move to microservices, potentially to using serverless or containers. And it's a huge undertaking and very time consuming. Obviously, there are benefits though, like when you get to a cloud native application, then that will improve agility, resilience, scalability, and performance, as long as it was done well. But there are big downsides. So particularly when thinking about trying to move as a refactor as your initial migration, then this could take a very long time to get finished. There's a serious risk of losing the senior management's sponsorship before the project has delivered any value. It's also hard to get it right when you're changing so much in one go. For example, doing microservices well is hard. So often a better strategy would be to migrate an existing application to the cloud, for example, as a replatform, and then to incrementally refactor. And some great patterns out there for how you would modernize an existing application in AWS, which frankly is far easier to do there than it is to do on-prem, because it's so easy just to order new resources that can be spun up for test purposes, to have replica environments and so on. So that brings me to the end of my slides.
Fantastic, Alan. Thanks for that. I've obviously seen that presentation more than once, and there's always fresh information that comes out. And I have a feeling that if we had a few more hours in this particular meetup, we could talk about these topics for another few more hours. there's lots of thinking gone into that. I did notice a question coming in on the Q&A, and our panelists have typed their answers, but for the benefit of the recording, and also for those who maybe didn't see it coming in, I'm just going to read out David's question. He's asking about reliability and availability, and customers who may be seeking 5 nines reliability. How is that achievable in the cloud, but specifically in AWS? I think there was a somewhat high profile availability issue with another cloud provider this week, whose name we shall not utter. But yes, in terms of architecting for high availability and resilience, what are the building blocks around availability zones, and how easy is it, or how challenging is it to achieve high availability in the cloud? Ricardo.
So I think, so I did answer this, but I'll, for the benefit of everyone on the call, I'll just kind of sort of recap. But I think the key thing to realize is that from a kind of baseline architecture and global infrastructure, the AWS is built to be very highly resilient and tolerant of failure. So if you look at how our networking infrastructure, which is private to AWS, is built, if you look at how we build regions with multiple availability zones, and then the network interconnects from there, it's really designed so that in the event of one of those availability zones being available, customers can carry on as if nothing had happened, right? But in order to do that, you need to make sure that you design and architect your solutions the right way. And you know, Werner Vogels, who's our global CTO, he says very famously that everything fails all the time. Okay, so when you've got this, and when you start building and thinking like that, you start architecting your solutions for failure. You start thinking about, how am I going to reduce the blast radius of an internal versus an external problem? And you start learning new techniques such as chaos engineering. You start practicing and skilling up your people using game days. And these are all techniques that will help you be able to withstand not just you know, an instance going down, but an availability and a region going down. And you know, Amazon and Netflix, for example, are good examples of using those techniques. And I mentioned it in my talk. You know, we have 7 times better availability than the next cloud provider, and that's really as a result of, you know, that architecture that we put together, but more importantly, that our customers can use to build these very highly available and highly resilient architectures.
So I'd add to that. So the wording the question as well was, do we see customers seeking to do that? So obviously some do. For some customers, that is absolutely vital. AWS gives you the building blocks to do that, but it's not easy. For the vast majority of customers, like, they do not need that, particularly if you're dealing with sort of end users rather than enterprise. People's internet connections go down quite a lot. So from their perspective, you're not getting 5 nines. And trying to achieve 5 nines in that kind of situation is pointless. I think a great way of thinking about this is error budgets from the SRE movement. And the idea here is that you figure out what is the business objective in terms of the number of nines you need to achieve, and be realistic about it. And if you do better than that, you're wasting time and money, and you should actually move faster and take more risks, because trying to get to 5 nines when you don't need it is not the best use of your time.
That's a very good point, actually. I think I'd echo that there is maybe sometimes a habit of people over-engineering solutions. I remember back a few years, in the day before cloud, when I was building systems using Sun Solaris OS and Sun hardware, very expensive. It was reassuringly expensive, solid, and we would build solutions, and we would be proud of uptime of production systems of 400, 500, 600 days, right? And then I had some of the partners of one of the organizations said, well, this is all very good, but you're giving me a Rolls Royce, and actually I want a Volvo. Yeah. And it immediately made me think that, you know what, maybe going to commoditized Windows servers that get rebooted every day actually is a better model. And so And we did. We saved lots of money. We had an architecture that was fit for what the customer wanted. So I think it is important to not just assume you need that, but have a very good reason for doing. And again, this is where the business alignment, comes in, and making sure that you've got that deep integration with the business. What's important to them? Is it a system, a record? Is it a system of information that is critical to you as a business? Is it important to your customers? Will you lose trust with your customers? Or is it just like that example I gave, just an application that's being used by 2 people every Wednesday afternoon, 3 times a year?
Yeah, nice one. Peter.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit to what the guy said. So, I mean, I think in Origo's case, especially with our greenfield projects, we very much look at tools and technologies where doing things like multi-AZ is not really hard, because we kind of leave it to AWS to do it. So I think that's a big factor in the decision. I mean, cost is obviously a factor, but when it comes down to flicking a switch almost, to make something multi-AZ, that often, in our designs make a no-brainer almost. And I also agree, yeah, the workloads do matter. I mean, if we deal with lots of sort of batch processes, which, if a single request or a single connection fails, it's really not the end of the day. The only caveat there is that we also have SLAs for our customers, which we obviously need to hit. So even if we could get away with slightly fewer 9s, we do try to hit as high availability as possible. And as I say, in our case, it's very much a flick of a switch in most cases because of our technology selection.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things as well that customers can do is, and I think you talked about it, Ellen, in your presentation, is around, this use to manage services, where a lot of the, availability is not your responsibility anymore. Okay, you basically pass that on to AWS, and whether it's a managed service or using serverless, you now have got one less thing to worry about, and you can focus more of your energies on, building the great applications that your customers need.
Yeah, great stuff. There are some more questions coming in, and they're good ones. I think, Peter, having answered a question, now might be a good time to introduce yourself. Welcome to the panel. Thanks for joining us this evening and for offering your insights and your expertise. Do you want to, before we return to the questions from the floor, do you want to maybe introduce yourself and tell us just a little bit about who Origo are?
Yeah, no, and thanks very much for having me on the panel. I think being surrounded by people like Ricardo and Alid, I feel a bit like a sort of wolf in sheep's clothing. But hey, at least I can hopefully offer some kind of a layman's perspective on some of these things. So yeah, I'm the development manager at Origo. Origo, well, we're an interesting company. We've been around over 30 years. So we like to call ourselves the oldest fintech in Scotland. And I don't think anyone at Origo knows if that's true or not, but no one's corrected us yet. So we're going to keep claiming that's the case. And yeah, we're quite interesting because we're owned by a lot of the big kind of life and pensions companies, but we operate as a not-for-profit. So, our only aim is really to help the financial services industry. Everything we do, we try to build, very cost-effective, successful services, but all our success gets reinvested into the company, and we're always looking for new ways to kind of, new problems to solve in financial services. So I guess that's kind of Origo in a sort of a nutshell.
That's great. I think we'll come back to Origo's specific business context and challenges in a few moments, I'm sure. An anonymous attendee has asked about data. Oh, data. How do we move data from current on-prem workloads? How do we get that into the cloud? And I guess what's perhaps implied here is, how do we do that without simply stopping the workload and making it unavailable while we take a big database backup and restore it in a different place? Alid, just put you on the spot there.
So there's lots of different strategies depending upon what we're talking about here. So if we're talking about many terabytes and petabytes, then there are the sort of snowmobile and this, services like that allow you to transfer that physically. But most people were not talking about that level of data if you're moving a database. At that point, So if you're sticking with the same type of database in each place, you can use the standard database replication technologies that exist there. So for example, if I've got MySQL on-prem, moving it to the cloud, I could take a snapshot of that, import that into AWS RDS or Aurora, and then I could set up replication as that being the standby, which would allow me to do continuous replication until that's in sync, and then my cutover can be quite small, because it's just the point of pausing the application, finishing off any replication that was still outstanding, and then switching over. The time when it gets hard is if you're trying to change the data storage types. So we've had customers who want to move from SQL Server 2008 to SQL Server 2017 as part of the migration. And at that point, yeah, you potentially need to think about other ways of migrating. So could you afford just the downtime of doing a database snapshot and moving it? Like, that's kind of the simplest thing to reason about. I mentioned before the database migration service, which basically is a pretty amazing, sophisticated product for being able to move data between databases where the source and the destination can be completely different versions or even completely different database engines. So to move your data from SQL Server into MySQL, for example. So that is an option as well for doing that migration.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
It's good. You make a good point about, maybe downtime isn't completely taboo. I mean, even our banks sometimes call us to say the ATM network is not going to be available for 4 hours on a Sunday night. Yes, Ricardo.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question actually, and one we get asked a lot. And I think this is where, one of the things that customers love is the options they've got and the choice they have from the AWS toolbox, right? And it means that you get lots of different ways as to how they tackle a problem. So you mentioned during your presentation about the relocate the new R on the block, right? Where we have solutions such as VMware Cloud on AWS, and what that allows you to do is if you've got workloads running in your vSphere environments, you can actually vMotion those whilst those applications are running without any outage to AWS, right? Which is pretty cool. I've seen it happen. There was a running. It was a simple demo. It was WordPress. Someone was editing some documents, and they moved it from a machine that was running in a data center all the way to AWS and back again, and it just kept running. So there are tools that we've got. There are tools that we've got with our strategic partners that allow you to move workloads with very little downtime. Or, as you mentioned, managing the downtime. And I think that the database migration service and Aurora are phenomenal ways of moving large amounts of data, especially with the Amazon Aurora's global sort of multi-master architecture as well. Allows customers to move those workloads really, really quickly and minimize the outage to their customers. So I think that's something else to think about as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think in Origo's case, we're actually quite proud when we can say, we're doing a release and it's going to be zero downtime, and most of the time with our BAU releases, that is the case. I think if it was something along the lines of, moving database, migrating data, yeah, I think the main thing for us, we need to just inform our customers upfront about the migrations, and it's usually not an issue. So I guess it's a trade-off, and often it's not worth the extra cost and effort to make a switchover be zero downtime when really an hour outage, which was communicated up front, is often more than enough, especially if it's done if it's done out of core hours, if it's a service that runs during core hours. I think it's at some point we'll say, right, it's maybe not worth us spending too much time on avoiding a downtime, because 99% of the time we don't have downtimes when we do releases, which is the norm, and that's great.
Yeah, one thing to think about is as organizations move to reinvention and they start adopting cloud native architectures and cloud native solutions, then this kind of the whole concept of downtime to a large extent goes away, right? Because you can start doing releases of parts of your application. You can do blue-green deployments, you can do canary deployments, and effectively what you do is you're automating the deployment process so that actually your customers don't actually see or notice the fact that your application's been changed. So I think that's the other thing, is that availability during migrations or availability doing changes is something that I very much think of as kind of the current architecture, but it's something that probably when we look back in maybe 10 years, we think, well, wow, we actually gave our customers outage when we made changes. That's crazy.
I'm sure there's a metaphor about a duck paddling furiously beneath the surface, but yeah, good tools, sharp tools. There is another question in the Q&A, but I'm going to come back to that. I want to return to you, Peter. You've kind of mentioned a bit about what Origo does for the financial services industry. Why did you decide to get into AWS, and what kind of applications do you now, as an organization, have running there? Just for a bit of color, a bit of context.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I guess about sort of 4 or 5 years ago, when I joined Origo, we very much had this vision where we wanted to expand our portfolio significantly, and we had a lot of great ideas, and we had a lot of problems that we wanted to solve in the industry. And obviously, to do that, we need to be very agile and flexible, and we also have to be able to take some risks. Some things which we think the industry will love this actually turn out to be something that's not going to be used at all. So I think we really had to be in a position where we could deploy proof of concepts, prototypes, so on, test it with the industry, test it with our customers, and really sort of really try to see what is it that is going to work, and what is it that our customers actually want. And obviously, Origo being around for 30 years, clearly we have a lot of on-prem services, and with the on-prem model, it would have been very difficult, I think, to do these kind of to go forward with these kind of business opportunities. So that's really the main one for us, I think, because rather than covering all the advantages we get from the cloud, I think the key thing was that we really need to be agile and move quickly and be able to try things out, so on. In terms of types of, oh, sorry.
No, please talk.
Oh, yeah, no, just in terms of the types of applications, yeah, so it's a mixture. So I mainly look after the kind of the greenfield projects, so the very, very new modern projects. But as I said, there's a bunch of other very successful long-running services in Origo as well, which are also going through they're at various points in that sort of journey. So some of these are going through kind of gradual migration projects, and we're also looking at things like hybrid cloud setups as well, because at the moment there is still a bit of a challenge of moving away, but we're definitely getting better as far as with the cloud stuff, as far as the greenfield projects are concerned.
Sure. I really liked Ricardo's point about cloud migration. It's not an IT project, and I have to confess I didn't quite get that at first. I approached cloud migration as a technical problem, but Ricardo's point has very much been borne out in my experience of helping Cloudsoft customers over the years. A very large number of the problems, the challenges that we face, they're cultural, they're organizational problems rather than technical. Aled, do you want to touch on some of the experiences that you've seen, particularly the non-technical, the cultural / organizational challenges?
Sure. Yeah, so I also completely agree with that statement. So some of those challenges include the expectations. So what does it mean to actually have a successful cloud adoption? Making sure that everybody's on the same page, the same business goals is really important. The next one is making sure that everybody's working together on that. So to do a successful migration, even of a single application, requires involvement from a whole bunch of different teams. You've got the folk who are responsible for the application development side, for operations, from security, from governance, from the business side, and also the finance team, who are now going to be faced with this cloud bill. And all of these people need to work together. So For an individual application, that could involve setting up some kind of virtual team where you've got representatives from each of those to make sure that things be communicated around expectations, what else needs to change. But in terms of the preparation side of it, like to get those to work together, rather than just DevOps, we're really talking about DevSec, Biz, FinOps. And how do we make sure that they're all collaborating and they're all actually going to change the way that the company operates? So we don't want to have those traditional silos of the developers and the operations team being completely separate and throwing things over the wall. We could try to move towards the, like, you built it, you run it. Some companies are ready for this. Others, it's a slow process for that. The idea of from an application developer being on call is incredibly scary for some developers and not something you just launch into changing. Also, sometimes the companies have introduced those silos deliberately. Like one reason for that could be a separation of duties, particularly in financial services, that they don't want to have the possibility of people being able to go in and steal data. It would require multiple employees from different teams to work together before particular changes could happen or data to be stolen or whatever it might be. But the problem is that often leads to the strictest rules being applied everywhere, slowing everything down. And many of the applications really don't require those really strict level of control. And also there's other ways to achieve this, to manage to get that, the control and audit compliance things that you need. So if we look at Capital One and Sterling Bank and Monzo and how they do things, like the security team can introduce controls and guardrails and permission boundaries while still allowing the teams to innovate and deploy changes without having to hand over to a completely separate operations team.
Yes, good points. Good points. Ricardo, what's been your experience of?
Yeah, I think for me, I've talked a lot about executive sponsorship, okay, and I think that not just cloud, but all the significant transformation programs I've worked on in my 30 years, I've always had a senior driver, and it's mattered not just to him, but to the business or her, but to the business, right? And I think that's key, and it's even more important now, the fact that organizations now see technology as critical, not just nice to have. So I think making them be aware of that. So you need to think about programs like CAF and how you build those relationships. You know, what is your CIO and CTO doing for enterprise IT? How are they building the right relationships? One of the things that I used to do is encourage the enterprise IT to build relationships with the business and work with the business teams. Let's say 1 day a week, just so that they could understand that. Now, I think as we look towards the future, you know, cloud is going to bring cloud native architectures, is going to bring decentralization, it's going to bring autonomy to a lot of the teams. And one of the things that I believe that organizations need to do to set themselves up for success is think about the kind of cultural and organizational changes that need to kind of follow cloud. So at Amazon, we went through this journey, and around 2000, 2001, we realized that we had to change the structure of the organization to these very small, what we call two pizza teams. And the reason for that is we wanted to make sure that we could take advantage of the technology and make sure that we could continue to deliver the innovation and the features that our customers expected, and not be held up by anyone else. So we realized that cloud and these cloud native architectures were going to really help drive that acceleration, but we weren't going to be able to do that unless we had the organizational changes first. So we started with the organizational changes, and then once we did that, we then kind of moved to this kind of like cloud native architecture. And the thinking behind this is kind of echoed in Conway's law, which basically says that the information systems that an organization produce are a direct relationship to the communication systems and structures within that organization. So if you want to build these fast, agile teams, you need to echo that within your organizational structure. So that's kind of like the where the Conway's law kind of a relationship comes into this. So I think that is something that organizations need to think about. What if you look at how most IT functions are set up, you have like the network team, you have the security team, you have whatever team, right? You have these kind of vertical layers, okay? And if you were to look at the stack of the business wanting to do something and all the layers they've got to actually navigate, every one of those layers is a friction and pain point. Everyone is bureaucracy. And so you need to change that. Otherwise, you end up having this really great toolbox that cloud gives you, but not the ability to actually use that at the speed and scale that you need.
Yes, excellent. And I certainly recognize, we've worked with customers who are doing cloud projects because it's recognized as being strategically important, and it's got the buy-in of senior management. And actually, some of the application teams involved are not really all that comfortable with cloud, but they're being, the whip is being cracked, and there's a clear strategic vision to make the move. We've also seen companies where actually the senior executives are maybe not entirely bought in with cloud, and nonetheless, it's the technical teams that are recognizing the benefits. And there'll be a small skunkworks operation within the organization proving out some of the benefits, de-risking, upskilling, some of the other things you've mentioned as being, challenges that need to be addressed. Without necessarily saying which of those two camps you fall into, Peter, what would your experience of the cultural and organizational shift?
Yeah, well,
what's the Origo experience?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think I'm comfortable saying that probably early on we weren't doing things too well in that regard. So I think we very much had made those mistakes. We had the silos, we had the walls, and so our starting point wasn't great. But I think now we have improved, and now we are doing things well. So it was kind of a learning experience for us, and I guess part of it was reaching out to partners like Cloudsoft, and you guys probably seen us go through this journey. I think when we first had an engagement with you guys, it was just some of the development team. The most recent one we had, we involved everyone. So we had our security team, our finance team, the ops team, and yeah, this whole DevOps or getting everyone involved early on, I think was a sort of a key thing for us. And I think what we found is like finance, normally we wouldn't even involve them in a lot of these projects, until it comes to the end where we tell them, right, this is what it's going to cost us. But actually getting them involved in the sort of the stand-ups and getting them involved with the project so that they understand the costings and how we attribute the costs and what kind of reports they can get. I think what it's really led to is a very positive outcome within the company. So we're working together with teams that we barely work together with, but I think more importantly, all of the teams, they're all important parts of the project. So it's not just a case of where we're just involving them just so they have some awareness. They become key parts of delivering this project in a cost-effective, reliable manner, and it goes for our security teams as well. We very much want them to be there, involved from the start and the design, and work with us and our partners on how their involvement could be most effective. So I think what we certainly found is with a lot of these teams, there is a bit of a change in mindset needed. So a lot of roles and responsibilities might maybe change slightly. It ties into some of the points Ricardo made, that there's just a lot of things that AWS worry about now. We don't worry about it because we kind of push that burden onto AWS. So there is a bit of a shift in mindset that was needed, I think. But at the end of it, now that we came out, through the tunnel and we can see the light, I think what we have now is just a set of teams that all work together much better, much improved collaboration, and we're delivering projects much quicker at reduced cost. So I think it's a journey that we really had to go through, and I think it's resulted in better outcomes in, I think, pretty much any kind of KPI that we can look at.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. You did mention an F word there in your answer, Peter, and that was finance. I was going to save this till a little later on, but I think now's a good segue. You can't really discuss, delivering an IT project, whether in the cloud or elsewhere, before the conversation comes around to money. And it's not just about the monetary amounts. I don't think we're having as many conversations nowadays about how is the cloud going to save me money. It's not; those aren't the conversations we're having quite so much. But nonetheless, the move to cloud does introduce a different cost model. Firms may not be as comfortable with this way of thinking if they've become very used to dealing with a traditional IT cost model, procurement model. And the new model, the new cost model of the cloud, it's challenging, but it also brings opportunities. What would you say, Ricardo, to people about the financial dimension of cloud adoption, and crucially how to understand what cloud costs are all about?
Yeah, I mean, you're bang on the money, okay? And I think that the initial conversations are about saving money. Now it's about delivering faster innovation, business agility, and look at the last 6 months, right? We've had customers like TUI, for example, able to scale down their resources and reduce their footprint and cost by 55%, right? Could they have done that in a data center world? Probably not. Yeah, we've had other customers like Melia who were able to spin out their people so they could work from home through remote workspaces in 10 days. So I think that value, okay, that's what the conversation is about now. And I think that there are a few things to talk about here. So first of all, one of the things that I think anyone going to the cloud needs to understand is the way that cloud does a deep dive into how every little thing that you do is accountable. And so in old IT parlance, it's show back and charge back, that kind of thing. But we've already, because we've been doing this for so many years, we've already developed best practices. So we have a well-architected framework that has a number of different pillars. One of them is a cost optimization piece, which allows you to start thinking about how you can optimize on cost. People who are familiar with a kind of like a thought leader, Simon Wardley, he many years ago talked about this worth-based development, which is how when you start architecting solutions, can you start thinking about how much a piece of functionality that the business asks you do costs to develop, to test, to deploy, but then also how much it earns the business. Okay, and I think cloud native and moving to cloud and having this visibility of all the costs now as a business allows us to start doing that, doing things like tagging of resources. One thing that I think organizations should be doing today in preparation for this is a lot of organizations have got some kind of technical review board, right? So I've got TOGAF background, so I used to sit on a technical design authority review board. Architects and solutions would come through my table, we'd review it, and they'd go out with a rubber stamp or no, this is rubbish, go and do it again. But that was based on the fact that IT was free, right? As in to a certain extent, there was a fixed cost, but actually, the rest of it was like, was kind of like invisible. What organizations can start doing, this is what I started doing a few years ago, is building in the mechanisms to that review board to think about how much does this design cost. Okay, so it could be as simple as for every new design, calculate and estimate how much this different designs cost, and then when you implement it, you can start kind of capturing the real costs. And then over time track to see estimated versus real, and that starts building in the kind of mental muscle of actually start thinking about economics within your review process, but more importantly within your architects as well. So there's a few things that you can start with, and obviously that estimation process isn't exact science. It's still we're still working it, but I think people should start there and start thinking about economics as a fundamental part of design.
I want to bring Alad in here. I realize we don't have a huge amount of time according to the original timescales, but these are interesting conversations, so hopefully if we run over we can ask forgiveness rather than permission. Alad, I know that you're very active in the FinOps space and have had some interesting conversations on costs and how costs change when you move to the cloud. You got a brief potted summary of what that's been about?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing to note is like cost estimation is very, very hard to do accurately. And the total cost of ownership plus the development effort is even harder to estimate. So the FinOps movement is attempting to combine the finance with the rest of the organization for that cloud adoption. The challenges that the finance teams have are often around like, how do I understand these costs and how do I predict what those costs are? And we've got to think about like the responsibilities for that finance team. They've got these fiduciary responsibilities. The CFO is going to sign off on that they've reviewed costs and have these financial reports, and they might get fired or go to prison if they are negligent about this. So when they are asking for budgets, what they mean compared to what an application team means is often very, very different. And that's a big challenge. And the processes that organizations often have for budgeting are just, the traditional ones are not fit for cloud because they expect procurement can sign off before money is spent. And that isn't how cloud works. And with variable pricing, like the more data egress that happens or the more requests that your DynamoDB or serverless application processes, then the more expensive it is. You can't predict ahead of time what that price is going to be. You can definitely take that into account though when you're trying to come up with good architectures and so on, but you need to communicate that to the finance team so that this is not a surprise. And you also need to think about how do you allocate those costs? So instead of a finance team receiving some bill, and large organizations might have 1 billion rows in that bill, where the same resource is listed multiple times, depending on which pricing tier it came under, which is incredibly hard to understand. Then there's good strategies out there around separating things into different accounts, which is also brilliant for security, and tagging that means that you can actually have that cost allocation. But a lot of this needs to be thought about ahead of time. And then you get on to just actually making sure that you're not wasting money. So instead of thinking of cloud as pay for what you use, cloud is pay for what you leave running. So if you have development environments you leave on overnight, you get charged for those even though you're not using it. So making sure that you do things like turn off your development environment overnight, look at auto scaling so that you don't you're not running at like lots of VMs when during quiet times, looking at spot instances as a different, much cheaper way of running for certain workloads, looking at savings plans and discounts. There's loads of ways to decrease your bill as well and to keep control of that. So yeah, and come talk to Cloudsoft or another partner or some experts who can give advice around how to, like, where is the best bang for buck for decreasing your costs, for understanding your costs, and for making sure they stay low.
Thanks, Halid. I can't quite believe our time is nearly gone. I'm not seeing any more question Q&A coming in from the attendees. I've got one thing I'd quite like to ask, although I suspect it's a deeper topic. We may find ourselves wishing we had more time. One of the things I've noticed with people who are unfamiliar with AWS talking about cloud adoption is they go to the AWS console and they see 150 services. The AWS toolkit is vast and daunting for new users. Peter, as you've embarked upon your AWS adoption journey, how have you kind of navigated that daunting menu of options, and how have you honed in on a set of services that you knew would work well together, and how have you ensured that they do in fact work effectively for you?
Yeah. So yes, I guess there's two parts to it. There's the greenfield projects, which we've started recently, and we have some in the pipeline which we're going to be starting soon. But one kind of section of AWS tools that we've really kind of gone all in on is the serverless tools, the fully managed services. It actually ties very much into the previous topic, and that we ideally don't want to be running stuff that's not being used. It's almost the serverless tools that kind of gives us almost like a kind of a holy grail of paying only when there's customers using the service and generating revenue for our company. So you know, we specifically tend to look for those services, and it very much ties in, you know, with the kind of the size of our company as well, and what we want to focus our energy on. So yeah, the serverless stuff was a big thing for us. But one thing I think that we realize, you know, I think it's quite easy to sort of make the mistake, because you can Google the various technologies, and there's lots of kind of easy ways and tutorials to try things out. But I think the key thing for us was that it's not just about picking the right service, it's also how you introduce it and how you implement it. So, you know, things like automation, infrastructure as code, you know, I think that's really what was the kind of the silver bullet for us. That's really what allowed us to kind of, you know, not just use these amazing, you know, serverless technologies, but actually do them in a way which kind of scales, and we can, you know, we can stay on top of all these different resources, and in a kind of manageable way. So this, yeah, the greenfield projects are almost exclusively using serverless technologies at Origo, and yeah, the existing projects they're more kind of encapsulated. So looking at areas like queuing, and, you know, areas where we can quickly replace a component, you know, that's the kind of tools which we look at with that.
Fantastic. Thanks, Peter. Just on that subject, just to wrap things up, Ricardo, I'm going to give you the last word on services, on the toolkit, and maybe how does service usage tend to change from the initial migration as an organization's cloud adoption grows up, if you like, becomes more mature.
Well, just because I know we're running short on time, so very quickly. I think the choice in the toolbox is one of the things that our customers love, right? They love the fact that whatever they need, they have. And actually, the fact that because we work backwards from the customers, if there's something that they need and we don't have, that we work to try and deliver that. So we are seeing lots of customers using the managed services, the serverless, certainly to reinvent their applications. And we're seeing a lot of people who are doing that for their strategically important applications. But I think it is important that just one thing on this is that one of the mistakes I see organizations doing is taking the same approach with their legacy technology stack as they do in cloud, right? So I think you touched upon it, Peter, around the automation, right? The amount of times I've seen people reinvent a portal and expect their developers to go to a portal to use and interact with the services. You know, we should be working with these teams and helping them teach modern application development techniques such as infrastructure as code, doing all the automation, and you know, thinking and approaching about how you use and adopt cloud services in a very different way to the tools they currently use. Now, there is a transition period, okay, and you know, a lot of the tools are going to be familiar, but I think it is a very different approach you need to take. And I think that's one thing that you know, a mistake I certainly see is organizations just wanting to treat it exactly the same way. And a good very quick example is, you know, you take a workload and you move it from your data center to cloud, but there's even just with that simple thing, you can do so many different transformations, right? You could change it from an x86 architecture to an ARM architecture, and you know, we have this AWS Graviton to kind of ARM processor architecture, and it saves customers can save customers up to 40% of the cost, but still have, you know, them with the same application. So I think it's about thinking about what you could do from a simple transformation perspective, and then making sure you're adopting the kind of the cloud native and cloud friendly techniques rather than the stuff that you've been used to doing.
Thank you. Thanks, Ricardo. I appreciate you could have gone in a lot of different directions there. That was an interesting conversation starter. We didn't necessarily have time to do justice, but thank you all. I think we'll draw proceedings to a close. It remains for me to thank our three speakers, our two presenters, Ricardo and Alid, and thanks to Peter for coming along and offering some great insights and the tales from the trenches. I'd like to thank everyone else, the attendees who've come along and given up an hour and a half of your Thursday evening. I hope you've found the subject matter, I hope you find it thought-provoking. I hope it's maybe challenged some of your assumptions about how easy or difficult adoption of cloud and AWS might be. And I hope it has prompted some fresh thinking and maybe a few questions that we haven't had time or opportunity to dive into on this occasion. I'll finish up simply by saying the presentations that have been presented are going to be made available. We'll make sure that you can download those and peruse them at your leisure. And I'll finish up by saying, if you do have questions about cloud adoption, if it's a journey that you're embarking on in your organizations, or maybe you're unsure how to begin, or maybe you're already some way along that road, Cloudsoft, we do this. This is our day job. We help organizations like yours use cloud better. So we have available discussion slots, free discussion sessions with one of our cloud adoption and cloud migration experts. If that is something that you would find useful, we can certainly keep the conversation going. But regardless, I'd like to thank you all for coming along today, and a virtual rapturous applause for our speakers and panelists. And we look forward to welcoming you to the next one. So watch this space. Thank you all.
Thanks, bye then.
Bye all.